Hello, so this is my first video. I thought I'd just record a video to talk about some spiritual things, and this is a bit going through my head at the moment, and I feel like I could possibly share some things that might be useful to someone who might be watching. So that's probably the best thing I can do. I don't really have an idea of what I want to be talking about, but it's probably the best thing I can do is just talk and see if it makes some sense afterwards. So I think I mainly want to focus on spiritual things of nature, of course, as I mentioned previously, focusing on God and what God means, and religion, like what is religion? Not really what is religion. I'm kind of just rambling to see where I'm at. I don't really want to speak directly, but kind of more profoundly to see, to talk about more general truths rather than logical, factual ones. Because I mean, to be honest, I think if there's anything I've learned recently, it's that I've learned so much that I've been able to directly apply into my heart, instead of stuff that's just stuck up in my head. In fact, I've done a lot of things recently which has helped me to get out of my head. So now my head is actually quite quiet and peaceful. So that just means like I can actually consciously think about things, and I have that space in my mind to realise what's going on with my life and what I'm trying to do to move forward. So yeah, it's been a long process, but I thought I'd share some of the things I've learnt with you and see where that brings us. I mean, there's just so many different topics that I feel are really interesting. I'd like to focus on ones that kind of prompt some sort of knowledge through experience, through it's difficult to say. I guess it would be best to start off by talking about like the kind of biblical based beliefs that I found. I mean, I could talk about the church and stuff like that, but it's not really what people want to hear, I don't think. I think one interesting thing that I've taken a look at is I like to have a look at the scriptures. I've read the Bible multiple times. It's very insightful to read scripture, I'd say. Stuff like the Bible. I've been reading a bit of the Quran just to see what that's like. The Hindu holy texts, those are cool to read, but this isn't the kind of stuff that people want to hear. I think this is just like what anyone could say. It's like, oh yeah, there's these really important books that you should give a listen to. I'm just kind of laying them out as that's kind of been my source of understanding for things. What the reason why I mention that is because there's a few things that have kind of come away from that, which has helped me to come to some sort of understanding. I like to read anything that could be a considered scripture, just to see if I can find value in that for myself. I try not to just think, oh yeah, people say this, so that must be what the truth is, or people say this is bad, so this must be bad. I try to like decipher it for myself, which I think is quite fun, and you kind of know when it's right because you feel it, and I think that's cool. I'm gonna go down here. This looks like a nice path. So what I'm kind of getting at is like you've got all different, what would you call them, like apocryphal texts, which kind of paint a different perspective of the Bible, in the nature of them and what they're about. This might be a dead end. So you've got some of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are kind of more, I'd say, I mean, there's not much of them. I feel like I'm not in too big of a position to comment exactly on what they're all about. If you do want to look into that, then you can for sure go and have a look into them, and I'm sure you'll be able to find more information than I've got my hands on. But I find there's things in there which have been left out of the Bible which are actually quite interesting. And of course there's the massively controversial Nag Hammadi text, the Gnostic Gospels, which that's a tree, which paint a completely different perspective of Jesus predominantly, and talk about the nature between his disciples. As you may, depending on how your depth of understanding is of this, you may have heard rumours about that. I'm not going to go too much into it, but I think some of them are really interesting as well, because obviously you see in the text that Jesus spoke in parables kind of thing, whereas in some of these Gospels you see him from a perspective speaking completely unfiltered, which is really interesting to me anyway, because it's like, well, that when he's speaking in parables, it's kind of like, okay, he's onto something. It's about deciphering what he's talking about, though. I'll go this way. But then when you see him in this these Gospels, it's like, oh, okay, this isn't just any old guy speaking. This is like, it's very clear where his knowledge comes from, and it is clearly straight from the divine. Like, the things he's speaking is just incredibly profound. So I'd recommend looking into those. That's that. I think another thing that's interesting is possibly the possibility of the divine feminine kind of figure, who seems to have been kind of crowded out the Bible, the Old Testament and the New Testament. If we look at, there's names throughout the Old Testament where, without going too in depth into it, there's a lot about the Asherah, which is like the groves. It was removed from the temple around like 700 BC or something it was, by King Hezekiah, and then it was put back in, and then King Josiah removed that as well, which in the Bible it's clearly put across it was a bad thing, and it was great that these kings removed them. But it's also possible that those were very fundamental to earlier worship in Israel, and it paints a picture of how the Bible might have been edited by later people, possibly. Well, we see them as the possibly manifested in the Pharisees when Jesus is speaking about them, and it seems quite clear to me, at least, that they've got their hands on the text, and that they've been the ones who have edited them. And then there's just so much other stuff carrying on from that. It's definitely worth a listen, but it's not really what I'm looking to speak about. Going under a tree at the moment. I kind of want to speak more plainly in my own words rather than just analysing the text. But I think that gives a little bit of background into some things I think are fascinating. I think I'd really like to just talk generally about different subjects, like just like day-to-day living kind of thing, because I think I've come to a point in my life now, I've gone through a load of trials, and I've been constantly trying to learn, and I've come to a place where I'm more separated from the world, which maybe a lot of people can relate to that, maybe a lot won't. I'd probably, if I was a gambling man, I'd put money on the idea that maybe not a lot of people can relate to that, but yeah, I just feel like I've separated from the world in a way, and I'm more able to perceive a connection to the divine, because the world is very fast-paced, moving from one objective to the other, and I just find that to be crazy and overwhelming, and it's really hard to focus on God when that's the reality of things. So I try to follow a simple life, just eating simple foods. I mean, there's so much like rubbish in foods nowadays, processed foods, chemicals, all these sorts of things. I don't know where I'm going now. I think this is a pathway. So I just try to cut that down. Fresh fruit and vegetables, that's great. Honey, that's great. Raw milk is ideal. I like to cook rice, just rice, put vegetables with it. And then I'll use like olive oil, make sure it's just olive oil, nothing else. Soy sauce, etc. And then I like finding joy in these things as well, because I think so often we can try and cram our lives full of so many different things. I'm just going to stand here for a minute. It's a nice view. Maybe, I don't think I can turn this around. I'll show you. Can you see that? It's just a field. It's nothing spectacular, but it's a decent place to perch by the tree in the bushes. Yeah, I'm going on a tangent. So yeah, I just find joy in these simple things, and I think that's kind of what life is all about in a way. There's just so many, that is brambles. There's just so many distractions, but then it's also like a lot of these things that can be possibly taken as a distraction are put in our lives by God so that we can do the right thing with them. For example, technology with our phones. I try to do things on my phone which are purposeful and meaningful. I think it's just about finding meaning in life in a way, and meaning in every little thing, and working towards some sort of higher good, because it's so easy to get lost and distracted in the world. There's so many temptations, distractions, and I think the better we're able to cut those things out. That is bramble. This is not a good place to be. I'm going to stay here anyway. I'm scratching all my fingers. Maybe the bramble's a distraction. I'm not perfect myself, guys, don't worry. I'm just stating what I see. So yeah, there's so much I've learned, and I think just slowing down is a really important one. Clearing the mind. I could suggest all these different techniques, but I'm sure everyone's already heard them all before, kind of thing. I want to stay away from more generic stuff. Like I could say, oh yeah, journaling's great, meditating's great. Maybe at some point I'd expound on how I like to do these things, or I have done these things in the past. But to be honest, they're not really things that I actively do at the moment anyway. I just try to live and see where things take me, and then where possible focus my thought and take action, take meaningful action, because that's what we've been given these brains and hearts and minds and bodies for, is to use them properly. If we're wasting our bodies, then what's the point in having them in the first place? So there's so much that we have to do in life, and I think there's just so many nice things in life as well, like nature, animals, wildlife. It's just really cool. But I should probably switch it up a little bit. I think, let's see, what can I talk about? I think religion again is like, I'm very, I'd say, strong in my faith and what I believe in, and I'd want to make that clear. Like, I believe in God for a start. I believe in the Christ, and I feel like I'm at a point now where I get moving again, where there's nothing that could happen to change my mind on that, because I know it for a certainty myself. It feels like God's been directing me through a lot of things in life recently. He's taken me to India. I spent 6 months in India. That was a wild experience. I learned so much from that. Just learning about how to be independent, traveling from one place to another. It was kind of like, in a way, India was like my playground kind of thing. Like, it was just, it's affordable in India as a English person. So I just kind of went there, but I didn't I didn't live like a tourist. I think that's the most important part. I think it's so easy to go somewhere to another country and just go and as if you're going on holiday kind of thing, but that's not the approach I took. And I think I learned a lot from not taking that and trying to live as I was someone who lived there. That's probably a bit better. I keep going. That's better. So yeah, I should hold this high. Just remind me if I keep dropping the camera. So yeah, I think I've just kind of tried to live as a person in that country, and that means live frugally. Like, not stay in a fancy hotel, and I mean, for a start, I couldn't afford that. Like, I'm not trying to put on the impression that I'm some incredibly wealthy businessman. I'm not at all. I'm a budget traveller at best, and I just make the most of what I've got. And I think that goes for general life, whether I'm at home or whether I'm travelling. I make the most of what I've got, because that's what you have to do in this world if you want to survive, and if you want to live with God. Because I mean, you could get a job and you could work really long hours and just commit yourself to that completely, devote yourself to that, and you'll have loads of money, I'm sure, but you'll be using your time serving someone else. And I think it's great if that's what you want to do. I'm not knocking that at all. And there's loads of people, I'm sure, who have meaning in that, and whether they tie that to a religious purpose or not, that's completely up to them. I'm not saying, by the way, it's like you have to believe what I believe or anything like that. I'm just stating what my thoughts and perspectives are, and if you appreciate that, you appreciate that. If you don't, you don't. It's as simple as that. Everyone's on their own journey. So yeah, I think I've gone off a little bit there, but I'll go back to the travelling idea, because I do want to kind of close off things that I've started speaking about, because I know I have a tendency to do that. I'll start talking about something and I'll go into something else, and it's not ideal. As a person listening, I'm sure you're aware it's not ideal. So I'll go back to travelling. I think God has certainly directed me and helped me to live in a way that's meaningful, and going to India has been great for that, because I spent a long time there. So it's like I've been able to incorporate myself. I've been able to get used to it. And India is crazy. Going into the cities, it is like something else. It's just the experience I had there were insane, and it kind of forces you to start to wake up and go, oh, okay, this is how things are. Because in the West, at least, I think we take for granted the things that we have. So that's kind of something I want to segue onto in the future, kind of talking about the state of the world at the moment. But I did start talking about religion earlier, so I'd kind of want to come back to that. I think, yeah, so I have my faith in Christ, and I think that's clear to me, because you have spirituality, as I like to put it. You have a spirituality of the world, which is really important for me, at least, like spirituality, the nature around me, because it helps me feel connected to my body, connected to everything that's material about myself, and it allows me to maximize my experience here. But then I feel like you have another kind of spirituality, which is like the future, the eternal world kind of thing, and that's where that comes into. But I'm not going to touch too much onto that, because maybe I'll talk about it in the future, but I don't think it's obviously it's really relevant, and now I've got that out there, at least you know. But I think if I talk about it too much, it could come across a bit too overbearing, when it's not really the perspective that I'm trying to take here in this video. When I'm talking about religions, I'm kind of more talking about seeing the truth in all sorts of religions, because that's something I've been able to discover recently, and I do see it to be the truth. A lot of people would disagree with this. I'm sure. I know a lot of people would disagree with what I'm about to say, but before I found Christ, before I found the church, before I started reading the Bible, and the Book of Mormon, I should add, which I think is also that is a plane or something, which I also do think is a very insightful book, which again a lot of people will disagree with me on, even more than when I mention Christ, because that is not popular. But to me, that is a testimony even further that I'm onto something. So don't worry, you're not going to shake me. But what I wanted to talk about was other religions, because before I found these things, I was looking into Hinduism, Buddhism, just spirituality in general, philosophy, psychology, all these sorts of things, because I was lost. I was completely lost, and I just wanted to find something that I knew was right. So I studied Buddhism lots. I mean, my mom brought me up when I was young. She'd always be listening to like I don't know if you've heard of it, like The Secret, like a podcast kind of thing, like Law of Attraction, that kind of thing. It's just like positive thinking and positive mindset kind of thing. What you think about, you bring about. So I've kind of always had that ingrained in me since I was young. It's like I knew that my mind was a very powerful tool that I could use to my advantage to create my life. So that's great. I think as I've got older, I've learned to take that alongside a belief in a higher power. So it's like, yeah, I've got these tools to maximize what I have here, but there's also that influence guiding me along and saying, okay, you're not that wise yet, you don't have that much knowledge, you're still learning, so I'm just going to guide you through. And I think that helps a lot. It helps me to feel the love of God, the love of the divine, and that's just important, because I mean, that's what defines the position I'm in at the moment. Before I was lost, it was a dark place. I was feeling overwhelmed, lost, confused, scared, angry in some instances. You know, I'm sure these are emotions that a lot of people can relate to. But my experiences in recent times, which is possibly even, well, surely the reason why I'm making this kind of content now, is because I found something which lights my heart up, which gives me joy in my heart and eliminates these dark emotions. So for me now, there's no doubt that I have to share what I have, because there's people who need to hear this, and I just want to help with that, because I was in a bad place and I just wouldn't like anyone else to stay in a bad place. But enough about that. Let's keep going back to this religion thing of all of them. Where were we? Just talking about religions. I learned a lot from Buddhism. Buddhism was really cool. I think Buddhism has a lot of profound things to say, just like living life in general. I'd even probably go, I guess it depends on what kind of perspective of Buddhism you take, because I know there's a few, but the general idea of Buddhism that I get is like it's more of a philosophy than anything, because I mean, the Buddha, I'm going to be generalizing completely, so if I'm miles off with this, then please forgive me. But from my understanding, the Buddha kind of said, you go within, you do these precepts, you do the ways of living, and you go within, and when you go within, there's nothing there. It's just the self is non-existent, which I think is a good first step, because I think getting to that place is like, yeah, okay, now I'm clear, I see nothing. And I think in a lot of senses it's completely true. Yeah, I found some sort of camp over here. Yeah, so I think it is kind of true. Check this out. Looks like someone's house. I actually have no idea where I am now. I've never been there before, but I'll probably look back at that clip and it'll be like, you saw nothing there. My camera skills were terrible, so forgive me if that's the case. But yeah, I think Buddhism is a good step, because it gives a good clean slate for just spirituality in general. However, then you can take the perspective that I feel like a lot of Hindus may take to, which is that the Buddha was God. that he was an incarnation of Vishnu, I believe, which is kind of contrary to what Buddha is actually believed to have said himself. I believe Buddha said, "I'm not God, don't worship me," and then but then apparently he's Vishnu, so that's that. So yeah, that's the summary of Buddhism. I learned a lot from that, though. I think it's just a good way of living. I touched on a lot of psychology. I think it was good for a certain period of time. This is probably something that's relevant to the modern world. There was, I think there's loads of perspectives out there of like self-diagnosis and stuff like this. And I'm not going to say I disagree with that. I feel like everyone has their point of like the steps to self-realization. And you see loads of terms thrown around, loads of clinical terms. And the reason why I say I don't disagree with that is because I disagree with a lot of things that generally like mainstream healthcare systems say. Like, I don't feel the need to label things like this at all, personally. I think I'm going to come out the woodland now. I just don't see the point in that. I think it puts you in a box. Whoa, my camera isn't liking that. I think it puts you in a box, and it's difficult to get out of the box. But sometimes you need to put something in a box, so you can set it to one side and say, okay, I need to work on something else. But then I think that there's a point, at least for me, where it came to the point where I had to remove the boxes, let go of the boxes, and just accept how I was, and not in any one given way, which is relates to what I was saying about psychology, I think, and studying that, because I was looking at all sorts of different terms, and I was like, oh, this is me, my mind is like this, and it may have felt true at the time, and I may have thought, yeah, this is right, but it was like, it wasn't a nice place to live in, because I was basically saying, look, this is how I'm faulty, this is how I've gone wrong, how bad things have happened to me, kind of thing. And it's like,